Welcome to Black Jonestown. My name is Leslie Wagner Wilson. I'm one of the 9 survivors who escaped Jonestown the morning of the mass murder on November 18th, 1978. On that fateful day, I lost my mother, Inez, my sister, Michelle, my brother, Mark, my niece, Danielle, and my nephew, Duran, and a host of friends that I had known since the age of 13. We also lost 911 people in Jonestown. 305 of those were children who never were given the opportunity to grow up to see what their lives would become. They didn't have a choice. For decades, the story about Jonestown has been told about us. It's been picked apart, it's been distorted, sensationalized, and reduced to a single haunting photograph. For those who lived it, the families, the children, the elders and believers and the broken, their voices have not ever been heard, rarely centered. We changed that. Because Black Jonestown is not just history. It's a living womb, it's a lineage and a legacy carried forward by the descendants of those who survived and those who never came home. We are here. This space is where we reclaim the narrative and we honor our truth. We speak the names of those who've been overshadowed by the myth. We're also going to expose the grift, the long con that Jim Jones strategically targeted the Black community, not just in California, but across the country, for the sole purpose of financial gain and power. We're going to talk about those types of things and the abuse of the children. The first episode is who we are. This is where you meet us. We're the storytellers, we're the investigators, we're the children who became adults, carrying memories heavier than most people can even comprehend. You'll hear my voice, and you'll hear the voices of those who have joined in this mission to uncover, illuminate, and restore humanity behind Jonestown, especially the Black members, the Black lives. Because what some of you don't know is that the majority of the membership of People's Temple was Black, were Black Americans, and particularly Black women who funded People's Temple in the States and ultimately their death in Jonestown. So we're the survivors, the researchers, the daughters, the sons, the granddaughters, the advocates, and the truth tellers. We're the ones that refuse to let the narrative end at a mass grave. This first episode, Who We Are, is launching today, the 47th memorial on November 18, 2025, of the Jonestown Massacre. Because it's our time to speak, it's our time to tell the truth. And let's begin with who we are so you can understand why we have to tell the story. Because no one else has. And we knew it was up to us to tell this story. So with us, we have Jack Colbert, who is a researcher and a child of People's Temple. He grew up in People's Temple. He has an incredible story and he has an incredible outlook. And then we have Jocelyn Hill, our audio and sound designer, who is creating our vision. And she's done an incredible job. And I'm so grateful to her. So let's begin the journey. Welcome to Black Jonestown. Welcome to Black Jonestown. This is our first episode of an amazing new series. With me, I have Jack Colbert, who was a People's Temple member and luckily did not end up in Jonestown. Myself, Leslie Wagner Wilson, which most of you know was a survivor of the Jonestown Massacre. And we have our wonderful audio sound designer, visual designer, Jocelyn Hill. So the purpose of this podcast was to changed the narrative of Black Jonestown. This is the 47th year. And as of yet, there have been no documentaries, no information on the most unknown. There's been no coverage on who and what People's Temple in Jonestown was. And when I say that, I mean that the majority of the members were Black Americans, the majority were Black American women. Black American women were the funding source of People's Temple in Jonestown, which ultimately led to their deaths. But behind all that, there was a man named Jim Jones who strategically infiltrated the Black community, not just in California, but across the United States, for the and with his white cronies, for the sole purpose of financial gain and power. We, Black Jonestown, is here to expose the truth. We are changing the narrative after 47 years. So I'm glad you're joining us because you are going to find information that you never knew. You're going to be educated in how People's Temple in Jonestown happened. And I thank you for joining us, and I look forward to your comments. And I'm having Jocelyn, who's going to complete and continue this episode.
All right. Thank you so much, Leslie and Jack, for having me. Leslie, you know, you and I have had this relationship since what, about 2018? I
That's right.
remember when I first met you, I expressed to you how much the story of Jonestown just really captivated my heart. I can remember it being shown to me in school at a young age. And ever since the day that I saw that documentary, and it was actually, I believe it was the life and death of People's Temple. Um, Words just cannot explain the way that it has captured my heart, and I've studied it for years to the point where I was just compelled to find you and just kind of pick your brain about your experiences in People's Temple and in Jonestown. And from that, we've created a very thriving relationship. And
Mhm.
I love you so much as a sister. And it is my honor to help you to make your vision to come to fruition in that of Black Jonestown. So, with that being said, I would like to ask both of you, what was it that led you to People's Temple?
Okay, well, I'm Jack Colbert, member of People's Temple from February 1969 until that day in November 19, excuse me, and that day of November 1978, November 18th. And the elephant in the room, as far as Jonestown, is basically religion. Okay, religion, the smorgasbord of God. Okay, so basically, we joined because we were from the traditional Black Baptist type of religion that most of my friends and most Black people that I know come from, from the South on up to the northern states and to the West. And the big thing that brought our family in was that he caught us at a vulnerable time because my father. I was raised in a foster home. My father passed away a year before in 1968, and at that point, my mother was looking for all types of churches that we can get into because things had kind of basically fell apart in the household after my father died, and we went to a lot of different places. We went to see different evangelists or whatnot, Reverend Ike, this and that. Went to different churches in the neighborhood, but we weren't satisfied until one day a woman came and told us about this man that could heal you, and he could call you out, being like he could uh, discern things about you that you haven't told him, through for much better of a lack of words, it would be a psychic type divinity that he could pick up things about you. And so that sounded familiar, to some of the things that we had went through. We all believe that the Holy Spirit can reveal things to you. So it seemed like and a good way to get ourselves involved. So uh, the only thing about it, it was 120 miles north of San Francisco. Okay, so we had a car. My mother couldn't drive. We had somebody drive us up there, and to come to that building is kind of disconcerting because it's first of all it's a long way away, and it was a small building, and there was only about 120 people there when we got there. But what brought me in was basically religion and uh, a vulnerable time we had in our lives.
So, and that's like most of us, Jackie. Most of us, especially children, came in. Of course, we didn't
Right.
ask to come, but we came with our parents. And so, for my situation, my mother owned a care home, residential care home in Santa Rosa, California. It was myself, my brother Mark, and my sister Michelle. And this was in the late 60s, late 60s. So Michelle, Love and Peace movement, the hippie movement. So Michelle became involved with heavy drugs, mescaline acid, psilocybin. And my mother was just at wit's end. My mother and my father, though they were divorced, my father was still active in our family. So there was a woman that came to my mother and she told her about People's Temple. And we were in Santa Rosa. That was about an hour or so north of us in Mendocino County. And um, they had a great drug rehab program. So we visited and my mother was really not religious. I mean, my grandparents were, my mother wasn't, my dad was an atheist. But what drove her to People's Temple was the fact that she was desperate to get help for my sister, Michelle. And we ended up moving up there about a year after traveling, back and forth to Redwood Valley to Santa Rosa. And that's how we arrived.
Okay. What what was it like the first time that you walked through those People's Temple doors? What was it like?
Me, the first time we actually came on a Saturday night, which was interesting. You walk in, and it's a decent sized building. The parking lot's in the back, grass in the front. There was a house, behind the church, the building. But there was this pool in the back, which I thought was, why is there? I've never seen a swimming pool in a church, right? And it was warm, so it felt a little humid in there. So my first experience was on a Saturday night. We walked in, and there was this couple near the pulpit, and they were arguing back and forth, And then this man, who of course was Jim Jones, was interjecting, and I kept hearing traitor, and I kept hearing the cause. Of course, I'm 13. I don't have a clue what they're talking about, but I've never seen adults in that type of atmosphere before, ever. I heard my parents argue twice. So I've never seen that kind of interaction. And people were falling asleep around me, but I was so glued to this show. It was like a TV show. It was like a circus. Like I've never, ever seen that. And so that was my first impression. I didn't have I do. I would. It, wa- I was very curious about it. Like, what did they mean when they said the cause? What did they mean when they said the traitor? And why were? And apparently, they were married. Why were people being ostracized and scolded like children in front of other people? And there were some people that were falling asleep next to me, but I was wide awake. It lasted to about 1 or 2 in the morning. So
Wow.
that was my first experience walking into People's Temple in River Valley.
What about you, Jack?
My first experience, we drove that 120-mile track. It took us about 2.5 hours to get up there, and it was different for me because I'm born and raised in San Francisco, and I had been outside San Francisco to the local Bay Area or anything like that. But at this time, I'm 8 years old, and I've never really been that far. Okay, so it was a bit of culture shock, because as I'm going across the Golden Gate Bridge, going out north of San Francisco, I'm starting to see cattle and wide open land and whatnot. Like I said, I'm born in the city, so as we drove along, whatnot, I got a little car sick. Okay. So by the time we pulled into the parking lot of the People's Temple, which it was just a building and there were no parking space. It was just gravel and rock. And we drove up, and as I got out the car, there was a man that walked up with a big Alaskan Husky dog, and the dog's also his name was Husky. So he says, what's wrong with, he gets a little car sick, blah, 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 blah. So Jim Jones' house was right next to the church. It was a parking lot that, there was in the space in between. He walks to his house. This man that turned out to be Jim Jones, I didn't know at that time, but walks to his house and he comes back with a clove in his hand and a styrofoam cup with 7 Up type drink in it. And he says, put the clove on your tongue. He said, but don't gulp the drink, the 7 Up. He said, just sip on it as you go. And I said, okay, thank you and everything. Went to the front door, and there was all these women in these choir robes, young girls at that time. They had to be like 14, 15, or 16. And I distinctly remember uh, Jan Wolsey, which is kind of like a heavy set type of Indian woman. She had just a very friendly face. I remember that. It seemed like she was always smiling. That's how her face was put together. Kind of cheeky, whenever her eyes kind of slanted a little bit. And when I saw her, she just kind of made me smile to see her, and they were asking us, who are we and where you come from and whatnot. And it was just I was getting a really, really good vibe right there from the get-go. And then we walk into the church, and it's there's this water fountain directly ahead of you. So I'm thirsty, and I promise you, I have yet to drink cold water like that in my life. It was extremely cold, like right on the edge of freezing. So it was good. It tasted a little different though, you know. And so as I turned the other way going into the sanctuary, like I said, it's very small. And a whole third, like Leslie said, a whole third of this building was a swimming pool. And I smelled chlorine when I went in there. And then you had these folding chairs, and people were kind of milling around and whatnot. But again, I had never been to a church like this because even though I'm from California, we traditionally have all kind of mixed races in California. I have never seen this many white people in one place. Okay. It was like 80 to 100 people, maybe 120, but it wasn't like 200 people. And they were very nice, very, very nice. And that was like my intro. When I came in, they did the testimonies, and they had Jack Beam there and Archie Imes, which was the associate pastor. Jack Beam was white, Archie Imes is black, and they weren't really talking about Jesus. I remember that distinctly. And there was really no symbols of Jesus in the building. There was a cross on the top of the building, but to the right of the pulpit was a picture of Jesus, white man, long black hair. And I think that might have been put up like a month or two later. But there was nothing, you know. There were like spiritual symbols, but there was nothing. And I remember that the associate pastor was basically talking about the all the accolades of Jim Jones, other than, Christianity. Yeah, this man has done so much for people, blah, 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 blah. And Jones, at that time, he wore no sunglasses or anything. He just kind of walked into the building. This is before they introduced him. He kind of sit to the side of the pulpit and, very casually. And then, I think it was Jack was talking. Then Archie Imes introduced him. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Reverend James W. Jones." And they just started singing a little song. It wasn't cheering or anything like that. It was just really low profile at that time. So that was my intro.
Hmm. Leslie, I heard you say you used the word the cause, and literally every book that I've read, every documentary that I've seen, everybody talks about the cause. What was the cause?
The cause was supposed to be socialism. It was supposed to be this idea of living together, um, communities living together regardless of the race, culture, creed, sex. It was trying to build a better world, basically, based off of socialism. What ended up being, of course, was Jim was the cause. But that's what we were taught. The cause was everything. That's how we gave up so much of ourselves, sacrificed so much of ourselves for the cause. And basically, of course, we know later it didn't exist. That wasn't what it was about. But that's what we were taught. And that's what we heard was the cause.
Before we started to get into some of the red flags that you saw, tell me about what your weekly schedule was like. Because I've listened to some people say that they had no free time. Everything was about the cause or the church. What was your week like?
Um, well, I lived in River Valley. Jackie, did you live in River Valley too?
Yes,
So I lived in River Valley. So at the age of 13, basically it was youth group. Um, and that was on Saturdays, but pretty much. Wednesday night was catharsis, which you did not want to be called up on the floor for catharsis. That was, I think, everybody's fear, no matter what you did. So Wednesday night was catharsis. Saturday, as I remember, was youth group. We had the college students that were teaching us Introduction to Socialism, the Communist Manifesto. So it was a lot of reading and testing. We had karate classes by someone who had a black belt in karate. We did tuck and run drills in the hills sometimes, macrame. And that was just on Saturday. So I remember at that age, I felt I had a little freedom. Um, we used to go to the river, inner tube, eat hot dogs. So when I'm younger, you don't have so much to do, right? I felt I could still be a kid. It's just as I got older, more responsibility and more was expected.
Okay.
That's what I felt. So movies were still, still went to the movies. Um, so my days from 13 to probably 15 were not that structured. But of course, you were assigned duties maybe to go clean the church. And that was pretty much all I did as far as, a chore. But again, from 13 to 15, I felt like I had some freedom, although we were always under the thumb because we were under a magnifying glass because River Valley was the center of People's Temple. And as far as school, of course, we could not associate with anybody that was outside People's Temple. So our circle was very small. It was tight. And that's what I remember from 13 to 15. I still had freedom, was just after that things started really changing.
Hmm. And what about you, Jack?
yeah. For me, it was basically straight fun. No, just playing with goats and horses and dogs and basketball. And, at the time I'm 8 years old, so there's not really any pressure on me per se, but there was always this underlying, we didn't call him father then. We called him Uncle Jim at this time. Uh, uh, Uncle Jim says blah, 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 or yeah, da, 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 da. But just straight fun. And like Leslie said, at some point, when you got to a certain age, you know, 16 maybe 17, you weren't just going to be floating around there doing anything. It start to funnel you into certain projects, you know what I'm saying? So as a 8 9 10 11 12, all it just like some people say about this is the best childhood I could possibly have. I had hundreds of friends up and down the coast of California, you know what I'm saying? And people knew me and I knew them. So
Did you ever call him Pastor Jones?
no, I in the beginning it was Uncle Jim, and then it went to father, I believe, around 1971 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But when
Mm-hmm.
they advertised him in the beginning, like the posters or whatnot, they call him Pastor Jones or Prophet.
Profit.
Yeah, they put
Mm-hmm.
prophet in front of it a
Mm-hmm.
lot. But as
Mm-hmm.
far as the when I first joined, the adults were calling him Jim, and the kids were calling him Uncle Jim. Yeah,
And so,
Right.
what was the turning point between Jim and father?
that's a really good question.
It
Control,
is.
you know what I'm saying?
Don't you? Mhm.
Control. I think as the anxiety or paranoia or fear, whatever was in him, he funneled that energy into control, because there were people that didn't like the church in 1969. I imagine when they came out here 5 years before, 4 years before, there were people that didn't like it because it was black people and white people. Again, more white people than at this time than black, but
Mhm,
you were in an
mhm,
area where they had no blacks, you know what I'm
mhm.
saying? So basically, your question is what again? I'm sorry there.
What was the turning point between?
Yes, the turning point, his fear, more control of the people, Jim was too informal, Jim was like, oh, I can come to church and I can leave. That's the kind of vibe it had. But once it was a more, that authoritative father kind of vibe to it, which kind of derived from the peace mission of Father Divine in Philadelphia. From what I understand, I went there at the time, that he had some dealings with him in 1965 or
Mhm,
before,
mhm.
when Divine was living back in the day. And he took those teachings, when he took the model, he just really modeled himself after that because, inside the peace mission, this is like 1929, 1930 or something like that. You had Father Divine, which is a black man married to a white woman. Okay.
Mhm.
Uh, there was some politics in there as far as you would see a flag inside Father Divine's church, U.S. flag, so there was so many different things you could attach yourself to. But when he came along with Father in around 71, 70, late 70, 71, and then like the middle of 1970, he started wearing glasses. So you can almost, from a hindsight, you can, when you speed it up, you can see that how he just started getting scared. Yeah. So
And I think that's a good point. I think and that was a good question, Jocelyn, because I had never thought about when that transition happened. But Jack, you came in early, so we called him father. And I
mm,
think part of that, I think, of course, part of it was the control, but also you're right, because we were in, I don't want to, we took a trip to cross country trip and ended up at the Peace Mission, where Father Divine, that was his organization.
mhm,
And we got kicked out because
mhm,
there's rumors about why. So I think he went there to see if he could actually take over the organization. But I know when we came in, I just only remember calling him father. And
mhm.
I think that was 70, it was 71. And so you're right. So as time wore on, and then the congregation is growing because we're getting more black folks coming up, right? They're bringing buses from San Francisco, people are driving in cars. So I think that he's really trying to emulate, you're right, Jackie, Father Divine and the Peace Mission, because Father Divine had the majority of black members. They lived communally. They worked in the businesses. They were totally engulfed and involved in the peace mission and the work that they did. And Jim definitely tried to emulate that.
Yeah.
I'm sure he said if Divine could do it as a black man, I'm sure I can pull it off as a white man.
That seems like the model. And when I look in hindsight at it, is like when we started going those trips, like I say, in 69, there was no buses either.
Hmm, hmm.
People were like driving up in their cars, and I remember they bought one bus. But then I always got the feeling that it was a little bit too much for him. The adulation that was growing and growing and growing. I think he enjoyed it, of course, but you always had this because of the main tenet of People's Temples is you cannot leave. You know what I'm saying? Around when I came in 69, maybe, there was some of that. I was a child, so I didn't know. But
Hmm.
very shortly I got it's like, yeah, we're going up to the lake, we're going up the pole, and Father says it was always this. Jim was in the background of everything. So basically, yeah, it was as the crowd grew, like I think I heard one person said when he came in 1967, it was like 80 people. He said by 1971, it was just like thousands of people. You know what I'm saying? Hundreds of people or thousands of people. And yeah, I think he he was just always scared because around that time, I remember seeing they start bringing, there were security guards, in 72, 73, they kind of, they had rifles and they would be like in front of the church because people were always throwing stuff at the church, like some people hated it, they would throw dead animals, they throw rocks and apples and drive by and use all kind of, negative words against us and whatnot. But he, as he grew, more prejudice, more hate, and then more love from people that came in.
Where did that
Because you have
hatred?
this, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, Jack. Leslie, I wanted to address something that Jackie
Mhm,
just said. Where did
mhm,
that hatred stem from?
mm.
Why do people hate the church?
Black and white together. And especially in the area that we were in, the area was it's the area was like pastoral hills and vines and grape vineyards and you know and it was all white. You might if they do the demographics on it now, how many black people were in Mendocino County, which encompassed a large area. Oh God, it might have been 20 people in the whole county, but in Redwood Valley, I don't think there were any people that were not in the church. No any black people that were not, in the church. And then Ukiah, I think there might have been one or two, which is Ukiah is like 7 miles away. And those are the two basic areas that we traveled up in that area, Redwood Valley
Mhm,
and Ukiah. And then they had Talmadge and Calpella and a bunch of little surrounding areas, but there were no black people up there. So I think
mhm,
the racial unrest behind the church,
mhm.
So when did the black takeover begin?
I would say 70, I think 72, when they started increasing the buses and started,
yeah.
bought more buses and started I started to say shipping people, I'm sorry, bringing people
So
from
that's
San
what it
Francisco.
was.
It was
They were
for the
shipping us.
flip, but
Sad.
seriously,
Mhm.
bringing people from San Francisco to Redwood Valley until it got to be too large. And that's a whole nother story how we, got in San Francisco. But I would say when I was there 71, it was more. Maybe by
Yeah.
72, right? 72,
Yeah.
73, it was
Yeah.
definitely,
Shortly
but
thereafter. Yeah. Shortly thereafter, like in like you say, 71. End of 70, 71,
I
72,
think 72.
73. Yeah, and then in between those years that I'm just mentioning, that, there were more buses, you know.
Mhm,
In the beginning it was like 5 buses, but shortly thereafter there were like 9 or 10 buses. And he always set up in economically depressed areas of every city that we went to. You know what I'm saying? So sad as to say, we didn't go into the Tennessee hills, you know what I'm saying, where they were economically depressed. We went to economically depressed areas in Detroit, you know, uh, Philadelphia, Chicago, where they passed out pamphlets in those areas and stuff like that because they did a marketing program, for just
absolutely.
basically us, you
That was
know.
getting ready to actually be my next question. What attracted black people to People Simple?
You know,
Well, I can say, I mean, I can only speak for I was a child, right? So I know we went with our parents. I could look back now and we could see the programs. We could see, yes, there was some help there. He mimicked Black
hmm
Panther, he mimicked Martin. He mimicked organizations that were helping the Black community. So, oh my God, I forgot the question already. What was
What
the
drew
question?
what drew black people to
Oh,
People Simple?
so originally, like from Jackie's family had a reason. Something was, my mother had a reason, but besides Michelle being on drugs, I don't have no idea why she actually stayed. Obviously, she found something because she was a humanitarian. So I think because Black people, I would say during that time, there was a lot of unrest. People were, still there's a lot of poverty, and People's Temple, welcomed you, and they made you feel like you were welcome, and that color didn't matter, right? That we didn't see any of that. We didn't see what the con was, but initially that was it. Our elderly that came in, and were people were well loved. They were well loved. And then that well loved, that I used to say the people were the disciples of Christ, not Jim Jones,
Hmm.
right? Those that really truly believe in making something better, having a community, and feeling safe and feeling loved. And once they got you in there, and Jackie talked about, they're going to ask you questions, and then they're going to go up, they're trying to find out as much as they can about you right then while you're coming into the temple. And then someone hands something to Jim, and then he reads it off. So religion too, and really it was the healings. Black folk, the majority of the healings, because there's all different types of people. The majority of the healings was the main attraction for our elderly, for our senior citizens. That was the main attraction,
Yeah.
which of course we know later, years later, that it was all staged. Every single healing was staged.
So take me through. There are two things that I want you guys to walk me through. Take me through what a healing service looked like, and take me through what a Wednesday night catharsis looked like.
Which one you want, Jack?
Oh, well, right off the
What
gate,
the stars of the healing?
yeah, and just to kind of back up just a little bit, uh, People's Temple, by a lot of people's account, you could be black, white, Hispanic, whatever, was ran like a black church. It wasn't like when you came in there, they were singing these Midwestern hymns. You know what I'm saying? It was hallelujah, blah, 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 everything but thank you, Jesus. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because that
Mm-hmm.
was like, you couldn't do that. Nobody wore a cross in People's Temple.
Mm-mm.
No one wore a cross, you know. Everything was devoted to him. So when I think about uh when the healing started, actually that goes back to 1969 when we first came in there. You know, I think up until that point I had probably seen healing on television or something like that, but what had happened is when first I had to I'm sorry, I had to back up a little bit. When Jim Jones came from Indiana, he came with white people by and large. There was a
Mm-hmm.
few black people from Indiana, but it was white people. In my opinion, 90% of those white people were grifters.
Mm,
They knew the game.
wow.
They knew the healing game. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I can go down a list of names right out of the top of my head. You know what I'm saying? So I'm sorry. Now I'm back up front now with this healing stuff. So now you're in a healing service. Everything is staged. Everything. The time for the offering, this and that, this and that. So um, Jim Jones is standing there and he's going to his healing service. Now you got to remember, and his shrills, or what do you want to call them, would go out and do work and go in your trash can and see what was going on, and if you were ever invited to their house, they're going through your medicine cabinet, to find out what you're taking and everything like that. So the main people, it was a very close, the people from Indiana knew, but there was a central 4 or 5 people that were like, you know, getting the envelope or the card with information on it and giving it to him as he's at the pulpit before he goes into his quote unquote divining, discerning what's on your mind and stuff like that. So yeah, so now the table is already set for whatever he's getting ready to do, okay? And it's very coordinated. And I'm pretty sure there was signs when people look around, okay, you do this now, you do that. But basically when you got in there, uh, you were told to along with the music, the music gets calm, and when in hindsight, he was putting us in a state, we were being lulled into a state.
Sure.
That's just my opinion. And he would tell us to hold hands. He said glass hands. So now you got a kind of seance kind of vibe a little bit, you know what I'm saying? And then he's the music, this real nice lullaby type church music is playing. And then he goes, somebody, just using this as an example, somebody in here named Ophelia. Okay, that's not like Mary or anything like that. Like Mary is kind of general,
Not
but
common.
really, yeah,
Mhm.
he
Mhm.
goes in a little bit. He don't want
Mhm.
to seem too phony. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And then and then of course Ophelia that they already have the information on would stand up, and he'd be like, it's always it felt like he was getting this message. I see that you have a son that blah 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 blah, and then he
Mhm.
going to you've been experiencing some pain on your side. I noticed I feel da 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 da, and she's like yes yes, and she's kind of startled, and the people with her are startled. Like
Mhm.
how does he know this? You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Da da
Mhm.
da da da, and then he says, I want you to go to the bathroom right now, and you're going to pass cancer from your body. Okay, the game is going. The nurses, the ones that's supposed to be okay, go inside the bathroom and pass this cancer. Then there were your tricks. You put your hand down your throat and you think you threw something up, blah blah blah, and of course it was chicken gizzards. Okay, and I'm kind of being a little lengthy here right now, but
Please do.
yeah,
Mhm.
because you got to kind of
See.
box it to understand what's going on, and
Mhm.
she would throw up. Okay, and she would think it's a chicken gizzard. Okay, there are other little things they did in there to make that happen. So this was told to me by a person that mother told them this is how they did it. You know what I'm saying? And went inside the bathroom, came out, and there's this chicken gizzard wrapped in Kleenex that they're
Mhm.
holding like this, and they're walking through the aisles. You got a person on this side, you got a person on this side. Okay. And a person that was guarding it at one point told me, he said, yeah, if anybody ever tries to take the quote unquote cancer or the chicken gizzard, you're told to they were told to eat it. If anybody tried to take it, you know what I'm saying? They want to keep that secret. So yeah, that's just like a little example of the mess, you know. And
So
this is how he made money. This is the generating engine of
that's
the
right.
finances in People's Temple. And
That's
this
right.
came from primarily black women.
Absolutely.
That's
Mhm.
if I could say anything, this is it. This is how you got bulldozers and grain into Jonestown and 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 flying flights, to here and there and taking boats and yeah. This that's the generating financial engine of People's Temple. If you had, of course,
It
you had
was.
you had Jim rhetoric was kind of multi-directional, so if you're a white idealist, just came from 65, 66, 67, 68, he's talking social justice. He was good at whipping that message together. You know what I'm saying? So some white women, some white men would come to the church. Some of their parents were well to do and some of them weren't. But they were there for the social change, which was pretty doggone valid at that time because we needed change. You know what I'm saying? So, but you can't underestimate how he spoke because it really reached people. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Mhm.
As far as the cancers, I always read, and you just confirmed that the cancers were always passed in the bathroom.
Always.
Did
Hmm.
anyone ever question why they always had to be passed in the bathroom? Why couldn't the congregation see?
You wouldn't ask that question out loud. You might have thought to yourself, I mean, I wondered where they came from, but that was part of the grift. They weren't going to show it. It was people, them walking, like Jackie said, through down the row with their hands held up with this putrid smelling cancer. I mean, no one would ask. That was,
Yeah.
you
It's
wouldn't
just
ask where it
I
came
wouldn't
from.
even I wouldn't even think that.
Wow.
Yeah, I wouldn't even think it. Yeah,
The
I
only
just
time, sorry,
no, you good.
the only time I had a real doubt was I think I was around 15, and I thought, where are they coming from? It just, where are they coming from? Their private parts? Are they throwing them up? And why are they all the same? Because they carried them out the same way. They smelled horrible. And
Mhm.
then as quickly as I thought that, I pushed it out of my mind
Yeah.
because we were told, I believe, because Jim told us that he could read our minds. So, but I would look around at
Yeah,
people
there's
and
that.
everybody was, that's what we thought. That's what they thought. But I just wondered that there was no internet at the time
Yeah.
to check. Why is this all the same, the same, plan, the bathroom, they come out, the smell. I questioned it
Once.
one time,
Okay.
once.
That's
Mhm.
something, Jackie, that you said you didn't even think about it. I could understand being scared to say it,
Mhm.
but to not even think about it,
Yeah, it was like a matter of fact. It was like, yeah, they're going into the bathroom, to do that, Maybe some people thought it might have been too gross or whatever. I don't know. I know I never thought it. And of course, the one I remember distinctly when this woman whose mother was healed through Jim like that, I remember she told me something, and it sparked a memory. I always remember that that woman drunk cranberry juice afterwards. The one that got that threw up the cancer, they would give her cranberry juice. And that's just something that a memory I had. Like, yeah, I remember that. They had that cranberry juice for whatever reason. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But yeah, the healings. People. I'm glad, Jocelyn. God bless you that you are going over this because this is it.
yeah.
It is it.
This is it.
Mhm.
This is the
That's it.
reason why people follow Jim. And plus now at the same time they're doing things for you too now. Do your son need anything? We can get you a job over here at Masonite, or we can pick grapes and get some extra money, or we can just help you with your child, like Leslie's sister. They're doing things for you too. You know what I'm saying? But there's no way you can duplicate all this love
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Mhm.
anywhere else. You know what I'm saying? Because you're going to go to a church and you're going to be welcome, you're going to have fun, everything, but not like People's Temple.
Yeah.
They're on some else. They're on some
They're
other level. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
they're in that love bombing,
Yeah.
Yes,
just
yeah,
love
no
bombing.
doubt.
When I was younger, reading about you guys' story, um, before I actually, started to do some studying, and I would always say, as most people would, them people crazy. Why would they follow this man knowing that he was stealing from them? He took them into the jungle, just running it down, because
Yeah,
you can't believe, from an outsider looking in, you can't believe that you will fall for this. But the older I got, I was like, I thought about it and I said, I actually could understand how they fell for it, because if you want to get somebody, meet their need,
Right.
and you
That's
got
right.
them.
yeah,
That's
you
right.
And
live long enough to that point to
absolutely,
understand. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
That's right.
absolutely,
Mhm.
meet them at the place where they're vulnerable, and you have them.
Exactly.
And that's
Exactly.
exactly what Jim Jones did.
He did.
hmm
So
And
I can understand how people fell for it. I get it.
right. And that's why we hit the communities that we hit. The communities that were targeted were people that were in need, right? Going up into the Pink Palace and passing out pamphlets saying, "Come hear this wonderful
absolutely.
man of God,"
Yeah,
you know,
Yeah,
that begging for money, purposely hitting people because they're vulnerable.
yeah,
And they did provide housing, they did provide food, they did help your loved one get out of jail, right? The services were there, but at what we see what the cost was.
yeah, yeah,
And it was all done for the specific person reason for the specific reason to gain money to rape the black community
yeah,
of finances and self-esteem. And so no one knew, I think when people had doubts because they were so invested because they had given so much, it's almost like being in an abusive relationship,
yeah.
right? It's hard to get out. It's hard to get out.
yeah.
But
And
as Jackie said, the
Mhm.
healings that was the ticket.
Yeah, that's
That was
that's
the
the
ticket.
intro right there. It's amazing. This man can read your mind. He's godlike. In
Mhm.
the beginning, he's godlike, and then
Right.
the more you get in there, he is God. Now, I can understand, Jocelyn. When you say, "How could these people?" When somebody has your mind, that's it.
That's it.
They have
That's
you.
it.
Yeah,
They have
they
you,
could tell you anything. There were
all of you.
people that would
Mhm.
walk off the Golden Gate Bridge if he told them to. He had their mind. You know what I'm
It
saying?
was, and I think, and you're right. And so even though we talked about the healings, but I believed I was on the healing committee. So
Mhm.
when people got healed, we had this pad, these papers. We would go to the person that got healed. We'd ask them for their authorization, their permission to share their testimony. And I kid you not, I believed, even though I had that doubt, the things that I saw, I believed that they were healed
Wow.
Mhm.
until coming back to the States and realizing it was all a gimmick,
Mhm.
all of it. And I thought, I remember seeing a man getting out of a wheelchair. He had syphilis, Jim said, in Los Angeles Temple. And he got up and he started walking. I was crying because I'm like, oh my God, he's healed. And then trying to analyze that, I thought, okay, well, prayer works. Enough people believe that something could happen. It could happen. And
Yeah.
so to this day, I still believe that
Yeah.
he
Me.
that he was healed, but
Wow.
by us and everyone else pouring in, because even though we didn't talk about God, because Jackie's right, it was not a church. There was no Bible study, no Wednesday night prayer service.
Mhm.
There was none of that. None of that. None of that.
Yeah, he tore the
But
Bible down.
he tore the Bible, yeah, spit on
Yeah.
it, stomp on it, and
But then,
and
but
then
then again, Jocelyn is, how could you stay? That's the part right there
that's the
that's hard to convey, to
It's
conceptualize. You had this crazy stuff going on, and you had this lovely stuff going. When I say crazy, I ain't talking about regular crazy. I'm talking about crazy, crazy. But you had this lovely stuff going. There's no way to conceptualize that. But
Mhm.
but he would, sad to say, he would walk by you. He would have you thinking that you knew what was on your mind.
That
That's
he
how
knew
it
was
was.
wrong.
So he people got anxious around him. You know what I'm saying?
mm,
Like he coming
Mhm.
down this corridor shaking hands. It's like, oh, it's my turn, and he know I'm gonna be thinking you a phony, or God, I better not think that. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Because what he would do, he was like a mentalist,
Oh,
not a magician. You know what I'm saying?
oh,
mhm.
Yeah, he could calibrate you
Exactly.
like to a fine edge. You know what I'm saying? And
Mhm.
if he had a gift, that I would say that's a gift.
hmm,
I think he honed
Mhm.
that
Right.
to a large degree. You know what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
So, Leslie, take me through what it's like to sit in a Wednesday night catharsis meeting.
Oh goodness. So to go, well, if you're living right, if you're a good socialist, you have nothing to worry about. For those of us who had issues, who were rebellious, whatever. So Wednesday night, right? It was stressful.
Yeah.
For a Wednesday night, basically, um, it would start off kind of like church, and then we had counselors, and Jim would start, reading something. So I'll give you a perfect example of myself.
Hmm.
So I graduated from high school early because I worked long enough to gain credits. My father lived in San Francisco. Every year he gave me $100 for Christmas, and we're in Capella Valley, between Ukiah and River Valley. And so I go to San Francisco because we're going to San Francisco. We're going down there begging for money, right, Jackie? We're
Yes.
out there asking for money and passing out pamphlets. So I go every New Year's because that's where the sales were. And I kind of got in trouble for me dressed. I was putting too much attention to myself, my mother said. So people were talking about that. So I go to Casual Corners and I buy this beautiful black knit dress with gold, piping down the front, with these black buttons. And I wore it to my graduation, my high school graduation, because we could not wear gowns, right? It was in January. And so I go back, go to church. That was on a weekend, I don't remember a day, on a Wednesday night. And Leslie Wagner um, come to the front. So I'm like, what did I do? And so I'm so nervous because I can't even imagine what I did. I didn't think I did anything wrong. And so then you have people come gathering around you and they talk about this dress. You bought this dress. You paid, and I know who told on me. Right? I
Wow.
know it because there was only one other family member that graduated the same time I did. And so you bought this dress. How much was it? It was $100. Why did you pay $100? you're a capitalist, you're bourgeois, you're
Yeah.
self-centered. Why would you spend that money on yourself when you can give it to the cause, right? And I said, because it was a graduation gift. Because I'm stunned that they're actually calling me on the carpet for this. And Jim started, basically saying, I'm a capitalist, whatever. And then people have to come up. Your family has to come up. And they have to say, you shouldn't have bought that dress. What's wrong with you? And your brother has to say something. You're a traitor. You're this. Your family has to come to the front and demean you also. They have to scold you. Otherwise, they're gonna be called out. And
Yeah, they
so
had to
on
do
that,
that in Jonestown too.
we did it a lot in Jonestown. And
Yeah.
yeah, I was on the floor there too. Um, Tarsus too. But and so he said, I want you to bring the dress back to the church. We're going to give it to the thrift store. And to myself, I said, then you're not giving it to the thrift store. One of these women in the hierarchy are probably going to be wearing my dress. And that was my first time that was one of the times I was on the carpet. And so you just tremble because you don't know your infraction
Yeah.
could be something as simple as falling asleep because you've been up all night writing letters to try to get people out of prison or writing, senators or congressmen or whatever. As a teenager, we did this. I remember up all night having to have a chemistry test the next morning. I was taking no-dos, trying to stay awake because you had to do well in school. So we were so under the gun, falling
Yeah.
asleep, asking for too much food, you know, being disrespectful to somebody that, you're not supposed to be disrespectful to,
Mm.
right? Insubordinate, not working enough. It was the simplest things could get you called to the carpet. And then, of course, with the beatings, they started with the beatings. But I want to say one thing. When we joined the church, I remember, I can't say how long it was. We had moved up there yet. The Jim was talking about having sex with men and women in the pulpit. And I didn't even know what sex was at that time. I was probably 13, 14 years old. And I always wondered why my mother, like so many others, didn't run and get out. And then I think everything he did, he was pushing the envelope. How much can I get away with?
Sure.
How many people will stay and how many people will leave? So between that and then the abuse that we went through, Jackie and I were children. There's trauma there. I know there's trauma for me. The abuse and then it being accepted, right? Because then parents whipped their kids. I got the switch, I got the belt, right? That was normal in my age group. I'm
Yeah.
68, that you would get spanked and stuff. But to have someone paddle you sometimes up to 75 times and then you and not leave, the parents had to sign waivers, but you have beatings like that. And so that's a Wednesday night meeting. And it could be anything. There's children that are getting paddled. There's adults that are getting paddled. That's just in Redwood Valley,
Yeah.
you know? And so that's a Wednesday night. San Francisco, the same thing. Except then it's turning into boxing matches with an opponent that can no way protect himself against a larger component and drawing blood, right? And then the electric monster with the electroids, electric shock. It was constant abuse. So any Wednesday night, you didn't know if you're going to come through it or not. And when we talk about Jonestown, that was a whole different ball game, entirely different ball game.
That was going to be my next question. You said at the beginning, if you were living right, you didn't have anything to worry about. Well, how would you know?
Exactly. Well, you think because you're trying to exactly because you don't know what the infraction is.
Yeah.
It could be someone just not liking you that day, or maybe you looked at them a certain way. So it was just like open season on anyone. And Jonestown was, I mean, what do? You work in 12-hour days,
Yeah.
right? You're exhausted. People are hungry, and you're still called up on the floor for, you know, maybe taking an extra piece of something, a piece of bread. Things simple, simple.
Did your family ever come up to you afterward to say, I had to do that. I don't really mean that. I had to do that. Was
No,
there any of that?
no, no, no. And I think by that time, my mother, I know by the time we got to San Francisco, she was pretty well gone as far as totally immersed in people's stuff. Mhm, mhm. And of course, in Jonestown, I would never ask her.
Yeah.
I couldn't. I didn't. I couldn't. I couldn't.
Wow. So when did you guys start to see the red flags? When did you start to believe, okay, something's amiss here?
I think for me, because after I had Jakari, the world opened up to me. I realized here I am, 18, having a baby. I'm married, right? I was in a very controlling situation. Of course, People's Temple was controlling. So when I moved down to San Francisco, basically, I separated from Joe. He kept Jakari at the ranch with another family, and I moved to San Francisco. And then I started seeing life, and it wasn't the best of life, right? I mean, it was another life. But what I started really seeing was, I wonder what is the purpose? What is the purpose of this?
Hmm.
What is the purpose of what's the cause? I mean, I didn't see any growth, basically. I mean, we had the building, we had the buses, but people were living communally. But what was the plan? And then, of course, they talked about Jonestown, and I had no intention of going to Jonestown. And the only reason I went to Jonestown was because Jim took Jakari with him when he left, when he made the Exodus. That's the only reason I followed my son.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I never would have went. And I think if I hadn't went, maybe my family wouldn't have went. Maybe we wouldn't have lost them.
Really? Why do you think that? Why do you think if you hadn't have gone, you could have saved possibly your mom, your sister, your brother?
Well, I don't know if my mother would have really went. I mean, we were fine. I mean, she lived in a community too, but she was working at AT&T as she was drafting, doing blueprints and all. And I think she was okay. I think she was happy to a certain degree. But so I don't know. I don't think she would have gone. And my brother Mark, my dad was, I'm telling you, so involved. Summer camps, I mean, vacations, all that my brother went, skiing, water skiing, you name it. My dad was an outdoorsman. And so I don't think my dad, I know my dad did not give permission for my mother to take Mark. But I think because Jakari went and I was there. And one thing I told my mother, I said, if you don't hear from me, don't come. If you
Mm.
don't hear from me, don't come. And when she showed up, I thought, and I know who told her. And the woman that told her survived because she was in Georgetown. But that's why my mother came, because someone told her. I said, don't come unless I write you. If I don't write you, don't come. And that was one of, don't come. And so I just think that they may possibly wouldn't have gone. I mean, Michelle had a baby, Michelle
Yeah.
having a baby, another baby. I don't know. I don't know if she would have.
Yeah.
I don't know if she would have. And if she did, she might have been under the impression, as they were telling people, you could come to Jonestown, then you could come back home. But anybody that knew how it was in the States, that they didn't want you to leave, there was, circumstances, consequences to that. Why would it be different in the jungle? But again, it's a compromising everything, because that time my mother had given up 2 homes, beautiful jewelry. She had given up a lifestyle that she had. And then what would she have come back to? And the others, what did they have left after they gave everything?
Yeah.
After they gave everything, you know. But I don't think she would have come.
Wow.
I don't think she would have come.
Jack, what about you? When did you start to realize, no, something's not right?
Well, there were little things that would pop up. Again, the thing about the next generation coming up from, the 10, 11, 12. By the time, I mean, hypothetically, if you got in the church when you were 8 and now you're 22,
It's a long time.
naturally some things are going to be revealed to you, because you're more aware, you know what I'm saying? Now I started from 8 to 18. So when I got around, I remember somebody real close to Jones told me, you know, he can't, and they knew the game, they told me, and I was about 13 at the time. And they said, he can't he can't heal, da 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 da. And I forgot what I said, but I was just I like your mind, I listened and I wasn't in my mind, I wasn't saying, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I wasn't thinking, I just listened. And so time just went on, I'm having fun, you know what I'm saying? It's just um so what had happened, like I said, I was a ward of the court, right? So what had happened is my mother, we moved up to Ukiah in Redwood Valley in 1972, okay? And my mother, she got sh- real disenchanted with Jim because she started finding out that he had fathered a child inside the
Mm,
church. You know what I'm saying? That really, and it was messed up because, we moved in 1972. We had sold our home. She doesn't have a husband anymore. She has these two foster children, me and my little brother Harold, and we're up in Redwood Valley, Ukiah. The house is gone, in San Francisco. Now we're up here with him, and 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 she just started learning things about, this and that and that and this and so she stopped coming, right? But she didn't stop me from going still, you know what I'm saying?
mhm.
So I'm going and I'm just, I'm still at that age where I didn't go over into the more responsibility area, you know what I'm saying? But once I was down in LA, and I think this is actually recorded. There was a healing of a lady where he was telling her, to get up, you can do it, you can walk. And it was a white lady. Come to find out, this lady was a member that came from Indiana. Her name was Dorothy Worley. She came from Indiana with Jones or whatever like that, and that healing was fake. But I remember before this, there was some documentarians that came to the church and they were filming this service, and Jim was kind of paranoid about it that day. But I was backstage in the LA Temple, and Jim Jones and the church lawyer Gene Chaikin were holding up two X-rays, okay? And one was a broken bone, and the other one was the bone, whole.
Mhm.
And the lawyer was saying, "Come on, Jim, let's do it. Let's do it." In other words, in hindsight, let's use this as okay, this person got healed, and this is what it looks like now. But he was like, "No, no, we're not going to do that." You know what I'm saying? So then I started thinking,
Hmm.
okay, but now this is 1975, 6 around there. So I'm like 15 or 16, and I'm getting into that. I have to get on the bus and pass out these leaflets. They're giving me things to do. I'm getting too old now.
Yeah.
Saying so your mind was always directed towards something. You almost didn't have time to, you know, boy, what went on that church service today? Can now you're tired, you really go to sleep. Because the kids, that's another thing is he took up a lot of space in your head because you were in church or you were in school with church members. You know what I'm saying? You just it was always there. You know what I'm saying? And so as far as red flags, the main red flag didn't happen until I was like 17 years old, 1977, when the News West article came out
Mm.
that said, this is what's really behind the scenes going on. Now, by that time, I kind of knew some things was a little crooked, but when that article came out, of course, they told us not to read it. They told us not to read it. So I read it, you know what I'm saying? I'm 7, I want to see what they're saying. And so, they're saying that, this person had their home taken and this person, said they were healed of cancer and they found out that they weren't. You know,
Hmm.
when you went all the way to the top, right below Jones, see there's layers. You got the planning commission, but that ain't the core group. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Hmm.
There's layers to go inside this circle, and once you get to the central part, in my opinion, you got basically four people. You know what I'm saying? And which consist of women. You know what I'm saying?
Think so?
I think women, yeah. I definitely know that Carolyn and Maria and Annie were part of that core group because they slept, they were in close proximity to him all of the time. You know what I'm saying? And so now like the main one that I think was close to him, I think, of course, his sons were close to him. I think without sounding too privileged or anything, I think Steve Jones was really close to his father. And of course, Jimmy, Tim, and the others were. But I think when you have that bloodline, it's like I'm in you, you're very close to me. You're a part of
Right.
me, five, you know what I'm saying, physically, you know what I'm saying? And and then you have Marceline, his wife, you know, and then you have the other women that I just mentioned. You know what I'm saying? I think they knew him. Now that's hard to say because I don't think anybody really knew him because it's hard to you were kind of like at bay. Everybody was like at bay a little bit. You know what I'm saying? So when you walk around, you're very, friendly and everything like that, but it's just hard to see what it was. But so like when I think of the person that is responsible for a lot of stuff like that, that's hard to say. But within that inner circle, they were like the levers that did all the mechanics in there. And then when I think of Carolyn, I was in Temple for, like I told you, the difference from February 69 to, November 1978. I never seen his main woman ever come to the microphone and say a verb, not bust one word
You mean a
about
side
anything.
chick?
Yeah. Never seen her talk. I mean, I seen her talk from a distance, but I never seen her around with the black mothers and how you doing, Mamie Brown or
Mm.
whoever, how you doing, sister, da 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 da. The only time I ever saw her is when she was going to the pulpit and passing him a note. These are the people that we done went in their trash cans and did, she did, but she didn't do it right before the healing service. It was like, you know, 30 or 40 minutes into the healing service to not make it look so obvious that that's what she was doing. All I ever seen her do was pass him a note.
That's true. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, but I think also Terry Buford, Debbie Blakey,
Yeah.
but you're right. I think there was a central core. I think it was more than four, right?
Hmm.
I think at one point it
Hmm.
was Archie and Jack Bean, right?
Hmm.
But when it came down to as time wore on, because
Hmm.
it was them. Those are the ones that, especially in Jonestown. I
Hmm.
definitely think it was Terry Buford, definitely think it was Debbie Blakely. And those are people that had access to money. Those are people that had, access to the money.
Hmm.
But you're right. You're right. It was a core, it was a
Yeah,
core
those are
group,
the
one of
people
those
that
layers.
left too. Those are the people that
Mhm.
left. Those are the people that left. You know what I'm
Out,
saying?
out of
Debbie Blakey.
Jones, right from
But but
Jonestown.
but I couldn't see Carolyn leaving. I couldn't see Maria or Annie leaving. The only
No,
way I could see any of them leaving around Jim Jones, to me, they were very, of course, Sharon Amos, the one that, killed her children in Jonestown. I mean, in Georgetown, she was
Mhm.
very close to Jim too. But the only way I could see them leaving, and I'm not saying that these women didn't do any work, what I'm saying? They did work, but,
What
you
was your
know,
work, Jackie?
scamming,
Hmm?
scam, scamming, scamming.
I thought you meant real work. Okay, right.
Well,
Well, that's what
I've read
I
some
mean.
stuff where, Annie did a couple of things over here in this area and then Maria did, but I'm just saying they're if they had to do what those rank and file members were doing, like be in that field for God knows how long and then ate what Jim told them to eat and sleep when Jim don't, I think they would have been calling home to their mommy and saying, I got to get out of here. It's just there was no
They never
paper.
would have.
Well, your currency with Jim, how you were tethered to Jim, meant everything in it. That was your currency. That's what you spent in People's Temple in Jonestown. You know what I'm saying? If you were
Mm.
connected and came from Indiana and whatnot and this and that, but if you were just like he doesn't pillage you of everything you have, you know what I'm saying? There's no reason for him to, call you up to his cabin and let's talk for a while. You know what I'm saying? So
Well, I think at that point, Jonestown was unique to San Francisco, but basically like San Francisco. Only thing is that Jim had no more. Jim did not want to be in Jonestown. He was trapped. He was not. His ego was not being fed. I didn't. He was on drugs, and I heard someone say, an ex-member, that everybody knew he was on drugs. That is not true. That is not true. I did not know. Many people did not know he was
I
on
didn't know he
drugs.
was on drugs.
No,
In
you didn't know he was on
California, I
drugs in
didn't. Yeah,
California, and
yeah.
certainly not in Guyana. But in
Mhm,
Guyana, it was different because it was only him,
mhm.
right? And the way he was so angry at us. We were just like the thorn on his side and everywhere else. It was, and you could hear it in the tapes. He was so disgusted because he was not in San Francisco, you know, receiving all these accolades from the mayor and the congress people and the other pastors and the people. He was not getting that. His ego was not being fed, right? And once he realized he was prisoner, then we were prisoner too. Because he did not want to be there. He did not want to be in Jonestown.
Why was he a prisoner?
He couldn't leave. We had the Guyanese,
Huh?
John Victor
John
Stone.
Victor Stone
Yeah.
custody battle, right? Because Tim and Grace Stone say, okay, we want to get our kid back, right? We want to get our child back. You had that. You have, I believe there's investigations on Social Security fraud, tax fraud, and he had been served. So he had been served. They were trying to serve him a subpoena, serve him to appear to testify against John Victor Stone, but that didn't happen. That caused a 7-day siege. You see, so he couldn't go anywhere But here's the thing: he could go somewhere, right? Jim had all the freedom that he wanted to get out of Jonestown. We had two boats. We didn't need a plane. We had two. There was two boats: the Cudjoe and the Albatross. So Jim wanted to escape. He would have. Now, why was he stopped? I don't know. Because as we know in the end, how much money there was, how much millions of dollars, hundreds of $1,000s in Jonestown alone, besides the gold and the jewelry that they have, confiscated across, from people. So Jim could leave. He could leave.
Yeah.
And there's a letter, and I want to give everything away. I want to give everything away about the Black Jonestown.
Yeah.
But we have information. There's documentation that shows what the plan was, right? But he was tired. He was sick. And one thing I have to say, this one thing that they didn't realize, whoever was leading him or trying to get him to function and make decisions. Once the New West article came out, and there were subpoenas sent out to people to testify, not just the ones that had the defectors that had left, but the people they had named that were guilty of maybe beating them or fraud. Or any person in People's Temple, had they been subpoenaed, they would have gone on, they would have testified and perjured themselves to say it never happened.
Mm.
That's the kind of dedication people had. But they didn't realize that. So then I think, why Jonestown? Yes, there would have been humiliation, right? But he could have weathered that. But the ego, no one in People's Temple would have gotten up and said they did that because we signed blank pieces of paper so they can incriminate us at any time or
Yeah.
use their signature as they did for the older Black woman, I'm not going to say her name right now, who was on the Swiss bank accounts. Her signature. That's all they had to do. This did not have to happen.
Mm.
But he was a coward, coward in California. He's been a coward his whole life and a grifter. And people died for nothing. They
Yeah.
died for nothing, including my family.
Exactly. That's why I'm just so glad to have this chance to say this because they talk about the healings, they talk about grifting, they keep going though. You have to stop here. You really got to stop here to understand it. How do
Hmm.
those people do that? And I get it, and a lot of it is a hard pill to swallow because
It
I,
is.
I understand how our people are. Like how did you? Ain't no way. Soon as he would have thrown down the Bible, I would have been out there. It's just really hard because I guess there's a lot to said about being self-sufficient in life. If you have to help somebody, help them. But
Hmm.
at some point, you're going to need some help. But I think that at that point in history, 1950s and 1960s, you know, that we as Black people it was just kind of like, I remember one time somebody is like, oh boy, I got this good white man. He's good to me, kind of
Mm.
vibe. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
I think there was a lot of that going on still because when I think about history, I was born in 1960, okay? There were people that were still that were around when Abraham Lincoln was alive. When I was not, there were people still living in 1960 that was around when Abraham Lincoln was alive. Now they might have been 90 or 100 years old, but they were around then. But sometimes it takes history a long time for people to realize. So by 1968, you know, it was a different time, you know. It's like, you know, you had rotary phones, you know what I'm saying? You had to wait a whole day to find out if something catastrophic had happened in the news. But today, there could be no People's Temple. The dirt that they were doing, the grift, people would have had that on TikTok, just like that. So look at this
I don't
fakery
agree.
he's doing. You know what I'm saying? So I remember in 1978, CNN had just started, but they weren't big enough to have a crew in Jonestown at that time. They were right on the cusp.
Mhm.
I think if Jonestown would have happened in maybe April of 1979, that's how close CNN was getting into this technology. You know what I'm saying? But after 1970, 1980, then you had computers and stuff like that. So the technology that was available in 1940 and 50 and 60 and 70 was different. So it would have been easier to indicate some of the fakery, you know what I'm saying? But he at the time what he was doing was on time, you know what I'm saying?
But I don't agree totally. I think that People's Temple would have survived had he stayed in San Francisco, because we have the same thing going on right now. We have pastors and churches that are scamming people out of their money. They're saying they're claiming to be a prophet. They're claiming to be this. It's the same thing. I don't think it would have ended up in Jonestown with 918 people dead. But I think the internet would have just he would have. I think it would have grown so much because you see the televangelists. It would have been televangelists. You see the fake healings with these folks, right? I
Yeah.
don't think it would have. I don't think it would have declined. I think it would have increased. He had a wide worldwide audience to approach, and there's still, even if the times have changed, there's still people that are gullible, and there's still people that need. And
Yeah.
if those needs would have still been met, I believe it would have still grown. I believe that.
Yeah. It's just that when I think about the People's Temple, okay, in a perfect world in Jonestown, you would have been able to say, "Hey, Jim, okay, hey Jim, I'm going to New York this weekend. My folks are paying for it, and on the way back, I'm gonna stop in San Francisco and get my hair cut or my hair done, and I'll be back. It's gonna take me about 2 weeks to do this." You couldn't leave. But when I think about People's Temple, I think about you can't leave. You can't leave the church because once you did that, you would expose what's going on. I think that's why he kept such a tight hold on people because the main tenet is what happens here stays here. You know what I'm saying? So if Jim Jones was out of the picture in 1979, I asked somebody this that was in Jonestown. How many people do you think if in the summer of 1978, with an honest opinion, would have said, how many people want to go back to the United States in July of 1978? And we won't bother you. Now, see, that's another thing. We won't bother you. You'll have a good life. We'll give you $1,000 each to get going and everything like that. And you're welcome to come back anytime you want to. And we'll have. I don't. He said I think about 800 or 900 of them. He said I think 800 or 900 people. If they had that type of deal to go back to the country they were born from, you can't go to McDonald's. You can't buy a Coke in Jonestown? He said, I think 800 or 900 people would have just said, yeah, I'll take that deal.
For
You know what I'm
sure.
saying?
For sure. I agree. There would have been the majority. We can't count the kids because they don't have any say so. But I can guarantee that if people had the opportunity to go, if it was portrayed as they said it was, because I wasn't there when they were showing, apparently they were showing pictures of paradise. I wasn't there. I was already gone. So apparently if they had said, if people went, and a lot of people went thinking they can go home. But I'm not just
Yeah.
talking about
Couldn't,
Jonestown. We know
couldn't
we
go.
know that. but I'm
Yeah.
saying, I'm saying People's Temple in the United States could have still existed, even with the technology today. And I think it would have grown because of the internet, because we still have those same types of pastors. We still have cults. We still have the same types of pastors doing the same thing, but they have a wider reach. People are still going to not pay attention. But in
But
Jonestown,
you
for
would have
sure.
to take out the part about you can't leave.
Okay, but here's the thing, right? But if okay,
Yeah.
but we're talking then. If People's Temple would have grown to the thousands, let's say, I don't want to say a ministry because I'm not sure. I'm talking about hundreds and thousands, and had different outreach in different countries, he wouldn't have cared who left because he's getting paid. I think that would have changed if he would have survived, because the way he was going, he would have been dead not too long anyway because of the drug use. That's what I believe. I believe with the internet, he still would have branched out, and they're not going to keep how who can keep track of that many people, because we have those types of churches today that are international, thousands and thousands and thousands of
But
members.
the dirt, you
They
know.
still, but Jackie, we read the dirt was in the newspaper. But
Yeah,
I know what you're
yeah.
I know what you're
But
saying.
the dirt is
I
just like
understand.
this overwhelming elephant in the room about how they operate it. It's just like, no, I don't want to go pass out pamphlets today. I mean,
But
okay, so what you gonna do with me now? Excommunicate me? It's just the way it was run. I mean, you might have a different opinion, and it seems like we
right.
do, but I just don't think that the way that the hierarchy and it was gonna be white people running it. It was
And
gonna
guess
be
what?
white people running it. You know,
And
so it this I can't see it, but I respect your opinion about that. I just don't. I just think it
but
was
remember,
it
go
was
ahead.
bound to at some point disintegrate because it
I
was
think,
built on crap. Yeah,
and there's so many organizations that are built on crap. We
yeah,
have a government that's built on crap.
yeah,
We have a
Absolutely.
lot of organizations that are
yeah,
built on crap. The thing
yeah.
about it
And
is,
if we
it's the
don't be
people,
careful, that's going to
it's
disintegrate
the
too.
it's the
Yeah,
people that join. So the organization would have changed. It would have changed with the numbers changing and the years and the technology. It wouldn't stay the same. And people still would have been there still would have been vulnerable. But maybe they and people happily turn over stuff. Now they do it. We see it every day. People sending hundreds and hundreds of dollars somewhere where they think they're going to benefit, and they don't. So I that's what I believe. So that the organization would have changed. It would have fine-tuned itself to be even more dangerous. But and Jim probably wouldn't have lasted. But you know who was in line to take over? That was already established, right? And no
yeah,
telling who else would have taken over if he had survived, and if I'm saying if Jonestown hadn't happened.
yeah.
I'm saying if he had
I just
stayed
don't
in the
see
state.
anything good with People's Temple.
Well, we're not saying it's good, but no,
I don't see
I'm not
anything good
saying.
about it because the way it
Oh,
was
I'm not.
ran.
But
Yeah.
right, I'm not saying. But don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it was
I'm
good.
not. I
I'm
know you're
saying
not saying that, but it's
right.
just like if the technology and if it would have lasted and this and that, it's just
He would have.
it.
He would have thrived. He would have thrived. You
Yeah.
can see it out
Okay.
here with all these other organizations.
Yeah. We
People are.
disagree.
We do disagree, and
Yeah.
that's the scary part, and that's the warning. It could
Yeah.
happen again. And it is happening again on different levels. It's happening again where people are being abused, held against their will, trafficked for the
Yeah.
sheer fact of these people making money. It's happening today, and not just in the United States.
Well,
It's happening across
there's
the
a lot
globe.
of people that are apologists, and I know you're not one that would agree with that. That it would have
I
been
don't.
a fine if Jones wasn't around and if technology it would grow into the millions. I think there's people that are apologists, and I know you're not one that would agree with that. I just don't. I just don't see it because it would always have that same tenet that it had from the get go. And it
I'm
and
saying it could. I'm saying that it could. I'm saying that it could have existed. That's what I'm saying.
well, that's what I know
I'm
that's
not.
what
I
you're
don't
saying.
say it was good. There's a lot of evil out there that thrives every day.
Yeah.
Every day, there's organizations that are evil. We hear about, we read it, and only because of TikTok and other, we're getting the real evil of the world. And
Mhm.
that was evil, and he was evil. But I'm just saying, this could have continued in the same path but grow bigger, but probably not. So worried about
Well,
who's
that's
leaving
probably in part, probably not part is the one I'm talking about
because there's
because
too many people
just
to
the
keep up
idea
with.
was great. It was a great idea, but like you say, probably not because probably not. You know, that's what I
Probably
said.
not what? Probably not
Well,
what?
like you said, probably not. You said you think it would go on, but would it probably not? I agree.
Oh, I think it would have gone on. I think
Okay, well,
I think had he not gone to Jonestown,
yeah,
I think it would have continued.
yeah.
I believe that.
And if they were going to operate it anything close to what it was, where you couldn't leave or anything like that, I'm glad it didn't go forward.
But here's my thing, right? But that's what I'm saying. I don't. I think they would have been whoever would have been seeing this thing because they're all grifters and manipulators. How else can we get the money? Because we're going to change the whole image. We're
Yeah.
going to call it something else. We're going to say we're doing, and you don't think that people would actually join that could actually continue when we see what we see today?
Not
Okay,
when I think of People's Temple, I just,
it wouldn't be called
if you could
People's
change
Temple.
the name, but if you had that same infrastructure of elitist, white, and of course we'd have to really dream to use our imagination to think that this was going to be perfect. Oh, there's just going to be a black person, there's going to be a white person, there's going to be, you know, to do this, and it's going to be all integrated. The way that when I look at the backdrop of the stuff that's going on right now, the way this
Hmm.
thing is set up in the United States and it's always
Hmm.
been set up, I just
Hmm.
I don't see that happening because the way it was structured, it wasn't right. It wasn't right. It
No,
was.
it
And
was.
when I think about it, and I know you don't think it's right, but it was nothing good about it.
But here's the thing. So that's the purpose of Black Jonestown too, is to educate. Because what we don't want to see, we want to be clear on the signs of a cult, because that's what it was. Because again, people don't join cults; they're recruited. So that's one of the purposes of Black Jonestown, is to make people aware. These are the signs. This is how they work. Because again, this is still happening now. This is still going on today.
So I want to go back to Jonestown. You and I talk, Leslie, and there's a generation that knows nothing about Jonestown,
Hmm.
and I think they should.
Hmm.
Um, so I love what you're doing with this podcast, but I want to go back to take me back to November 17th, 1978, the day before the day. Take me back to that day.
Okay, I'll take you back to that day. Basically, we knew the congressman was coming in because so we were already told that the congressman, the concerned relatives were coming to Jonestown. And the day before, a plane flew over, and that's when we didn't realize who it was. That they were landing in Port Coquitlam. I believe it was the 17th. And so the sirens went off because there were sirens that were warning signs, and when the sirens went off, you're supposed to gather to the pavilion. But during that time, we were only working the perimeter of the jungle. We were only working the perimeter of the compound. We were not going deep in because they wanted everybody close by. And so I was supposed, I was voted in to leave with, thank God, Richard Clark, Kumai Moses, and Diane Louie and the Evans family. And so Diane saw me and she said, "We're going to leave tonight." And I remember, the environment was tense. It was because we were on warning. We knew something was going to happen if they're going to show up. We just the anticipation of what could happen, right? When they came. But I remember going into the kitchen and grabbing this butcher knife and sticking it down my pants. And so they said, "Go to the pavilion." So we went to the pavilion. Marston was there and she was saying, "They're coming. Go home, go clean up, look nice, put your finest on, and then we're going to call you back." And so everybody left. We got changed our clothes, combed our hair, just, looked decent for our guest. And then later on, we were fed. And I remember I was sitting at the pharmacy stairs with Diane Louie. Great dinner. We didn't get chicken. Only when the guests come do we get chicken. And so we got this beautiful plate chicken, right? And still we could do the rice and gravy. It took me 20 years to be able to eat rice again, but we ate the rice and gravy because we had good cooks. We had excellent cooks, and bread and I think cassava. So Diane looks at me and she goes, "They're fattening the pig before the slaughter." And I
Mm.
said, "Diane, don't
Wow.
say that. Don't say that." And she said, "They are." So we went to the meeting that night. We got finished eating. We all went to the meeting. And Diane says, we're going to leave tonight. And I said, okay. So I didn't ask any questions because I didn't want them to think I was trying to be, get information to turn in because I was still married to Joe Wilson. And, was I a threat? I'm like, no. So I didn't ask anything. I just said, okay. So that night, the congressman was there and I saw Jim Cobb. And Jim Cobb was like a brother to me. And I wanted so badly to just go and hug him and hold him, right? Because he was like a big brother and I missed him. And when they left, I never got to find out why they left. The college students left, and that was it. So I was so happy to see him, but I was also, Jim Cobb is here. That could be something. Because he was going to see his family. All of his family was there, except for Terry Cobb. And so we went through the dances, of course, the entertainment and, the good food. And Congressman Ryan got up there and he's, talking about, you heard the speech and they were clapping so loud for so long, which was just, ridiculous. But we would do that sometimes. We would make that jungle sing by our clapping and hollering out in war cries. So that was, we would do that. And so you could tell that the environment was changing a little bit. And I was standing at the back row, right behind between the dirt road and the radio room and the school. There was like a railing there, and I was standing near the railing. And so somebody came up and said, Vern Gosney passed a note. And we're like, oh my God. So I don't have to even ask what the note said. He's passing a note because he wants to leave. So my mother joined me. So Diane finally came and said, we're going to leave in the morning, meet at the kitchen, I think around 9ish or so. So my mother and I were standing there and I felt nervous. I felt nervous and I anticipating something, but not sure what, but not really a danger. I didn't feel death. I just felt this anxiousness that something was going to change. So my mother was on the left of me and I was here on the right. And I said, Mom, there's things that are happening here that aren't good because I was still working in the medical office. And I knew there were people that were not getting sent to Georgetown because of their status. Either they thought they were a threat to run or they didn't fit in. They were not allowed to go get health care. I mean, serious conditions. So I said, Mom, something's wrong here. And she goes, baby, I'm tired. And she was 50 years old. And it was then I didn't say anything else. I said, mentally, when I get out, I'm going to go get my dad, who was kind of like a concerned relative, but not really busy in the concerned relatives,
Yeah.
and get my dad and come back and get my sister and my brother, right? I didn't see my sister that night, and I didn't see my brother that night. And so by the time, and so when Diane said we're leaving in the morning because there was too much activity, once Vern Gosney passed that note, then everybody was on high alert. The whole compound was on high alert. So there was no way we could have snuck. And again, I didn't know what the plan was, but there was no way. I'm glad Richard made the call, right? That it wasn't the time to go that night, but the next day. Went back, had Jakari that night and slept with him. Slept in my clothes like I normally did because we're having so many white nights and getting up in the middle of the night, you start sleeping in your clothes with your boots next to your bed just so you can jump in them and go, right? And so that's what we did. And so went to sleep and I could barely sleep that night because I just was so, nervous about the next day. So nervous about the next day. So that was the 17th.
And so when you woke up on the morning of the 18th,
I was, this is it. This is the day. This is the day. Got Jakari dressed, washed up a little bit. Diane gave me a brand new pair of white sneakers. I'll never forget. And, went to the meeting spot, which was the kitchen. And Richard Clark was there, Diane was there, and the Evans family was there with their three children. And and Julius Evans sounds like Sam Cooke. His voice was so beautiful, so beautiful. And there was his wife, Sandra, and their three children. And again, I was not privy to who was going. So they basically trusted me. They trusted their lives to me, hoping and trusting that I wouldn't say anything. right? Because I could have been a spy. And I think about that, often they trusted me with their lives,
Yeah.
and so when we're standing there, and then someone said, Michelle wants to see you, my sister. And Richard went, and I knew what that meant. If I left, I may not be able to get back, right? Because
Yeah.
I don't know, right? And then Joe came, and Joe, said, where are you going? And Richard said, we're going on a picnic. And it was such a ludicrous idea because you could not go to the kitchen. After dinner, there was nothing. There was no kitchen. You couldn't get a snack unless you somehow you got food and you were hiding it. There was no snacks after dinner. Dinner was it. Couldn't make a sandwich, go make a sandwich. You couldn't make a picnic. And so Richard said, we're going on a picnic. I said, we're going on a picnic. And Joe just looked like, what? And he took Jakari. And I looked at Richard. So Richard had this face. He's like, just hold on. And I said, I'm gonna go see my mom. So I went to my mother, and she was right there at the library next to the kitchen. And I said, Mom, she goes, what, where are you going? Not verbatim. What's going on? So we're going on a picnic. She goes, a picnic? So my mother knew me well enough to know that she raised she raised a woman that didn't have a lot of fear because she was so strong, right? She raised a woman that was flexible, that could make changes when necessary, and that was a deep thinker. And so she knew something was up, but she wouldn't say it. She goes, a picnic? I said, yes, a picnic. And she just, and I got to hold her and kiss
Mhm.
her and tell her that I love you, not knowing, sorry, not knowing it was the last time I would see her. And so I went back to the kitchen, um, and Joe came back and said, here, take Jakari, but don't go anywhere. It's not a good day. And I said, okay. And he handed me, to Jakari, handed Jakari to me. And then a few minutes later, when he was out of sight, Richard said, let's go. And so we began walking. And I always remember that day because, I have survivor's guilt from that for always. So we started walking down the path. And we kept walking. And then we kept walking. And so it's about 6 miles from Jonestown to the front gate. And so we're walking, we're walking, we're walking. And then all of a sudden, it goes to the left, which is the piggery side. That's the way to the piggery. And he's digging through there really weren't bushes, like tall grass. And he's wrestling for something. He goes, and he's mumbling underneath his breath. And then we hear a tractor come. So we jump to the right-hand side of the road and we dive into the jungle. And so Diane had made a concoction of Flavor Aid and Valium for the babies. And so I'd already given Jakari some Valium, and the other three children, they had some Valium to calm them. So when we dived into the jungle, I had Jakari was with me, and I was covering him. And then, I'm sorry, back up, back up, back up. I'm sorry, I missed the whole spot. Okay, I'm sorry. So we started going down the road. Richard was looking for the package, and then we heard the tractor. And on the tractor was Stanley Gigg. And Stanley looks at us and says, where are you going? And Richard says, and we're going on a picnic. This picnic, And Stanley goes, you got to get back. You got to get back to the compound. You got to get back. And we said, okay, we're coming. So we waited till he went over this incline, like this little hill, right? And then we kept moving.
Wow.
And then we hear the tractor, right? We hear another tractor. And that's when we dive into the jungle. And you could, it's thick bush, right? But you could still see through it. So we're kind of maybe 3 feet away from the edge because we had to move quick. So all of us are spread out, flat on our stomachs. And then we see the visitors coming back. You see the tractor trailer coming back, right? And we can hear their voices, Beverly Oliver, a couple of the couple of the staff. You could just hear them talking. And we're just praying that nobody looks over and nobody can see us. And so they pass. And so then so we were met in the jungle by two men, Jackie,
Robert
well, I don't remember
Paul,
his name. Thank you,
Robert
Robert
Paul,
Paul and
Johnny Franklin.
thank you. Thank you. I can never remember names. I don't know why. So they met us in the jungle. So we were already, trying to find our way out. So we sat down because then I still didn't know that the plan was go to Port Kaituma, which is on the right hand side. We got so close to the guard shack where we can hear their voices. So they come back, Richard, they, and Julius, and say, we can't go that way. So that's when I realized the plan was to go to Port Kaituma, right? Because that's where the congressman was. That was where the plane was. Because you could not leave, the only way you could leave Jonestown was either by boat, which was a 24-hour boat ride, or by plane.
Wow.
The plane's going to land at Port Kaituma. The boat's going to be at Port Kaituma too. Those are the only two ways you can get out, or so we thought. So we thought, and so we standing there, we're huddled together, and we couldn't go. We were too close to the guard shack. We couldn't go in front of it. We couldn't go behind it. We were just, kind of stuck. And so then we were talking about Matthews Ridge, and there's like Matthews Ridge is 30 miles. And I'm like, I have to go to Matthews Ridge. I can't go to Port Kaituma. I knew Joe would kill me.
Yeah.
But what we did was we passed numbers and said, if any of us don't make it, here's a phone number of a relative. And I said, if you see me shot dead by Joe, which was a likelihood, then just get my son and run like hell. Just get my son and run, right? Because I was prepared to die that day. I just was. I'm honestly didn't think we were going to make it. And so by the time that we decided to go to Matthews Ridge, it was probably, I don't know, because, we didn't have a clock. So maybe 11-ish or so, spending that time out. And then we started following the railroad track. And I didn't even know there was a railroad track. I never saw a railroad track. And so we start on this railroad track, and then the train comes. And by then we're pretty dirty. We look like vagabonds, right?
Sure.
And the conductor just looks out the train, and he's looking at us, and we're just, oh my God, someone's seeing us. We have to pick up the speed now. And so because we didn't know, Jim said that everybody in Guyana knew that we were there. And if they caught us free, that they would turn us in. So we don't know who's an enemy, who's a foe. We have no clue. And so the train kind of slows down. He looks at us, and we don't say anything. We just look at him, and then he keeps going. So we keep walking, and we keep walking. And then we come to that bridge, and I have a horrible fear of heights. And I just said, I can't do it. It was the train tracks, right? I can't do it. And so they took Jakari, and we took turns carrying Jakari, with sheets. I carried him with a sheet, and the other guys, they helped. So I had help carrying him. And so Diane's like, come on, Diane went across, because you got to go. I said, I can't. I was scared to death.
Wow.
I was more scared of that bridge than I was of getting shot. I kid you not, because that height. And so the guys were like, come on, let's go. And so I got on my hands and knees, and I said, don't look down, don't look down. I got to cross. And so we took a little break, it took about a 10 or 15-minute break. And then we kept moving, and we kept moving. And the whole time I was thinking about what my family was doing. Did they know I'd left yet? Was Joe looking for me? And I thought, if I see my dad, how's he going to respond? Is he going to be grateful, to see me? Because again, I'm not thinking that that's the last time I saw my family was that day and the night before. That was not it. I thought I'd see my family again. And so just the stress of it, and we were in good shape. All of us were in good shape to be able to walk that journey, but not knowing what was ahead. And we certainly didn't expect, that. And so the train came back, and it was dark. And Richard Clark said, we're going to get on the train. The women be quiet. We're going to find someone to take us to a phone booth so we can call the U.S. Embassy. So we got off the train, and they found a man. He said, I'll take you to a phone. Well, he ended up taking us to the police station. And then the police drew guns on us right away. They drew guns. And we don't know why, our hands are up. Jakari's, between my legs. What is going on? And they said there's been a shooting at Port Kaituma. We don't know anything about that. And so the conductor comes, and the conductor says, because of course he stopped the train, he says, it couldn't have been them because of the timeline, right? They're here, and how long it took to walk 30 miles, it couldn't have been them. So they brought us up to the police station, which was on a hill. And then we told them, we escaped from Jonestown. And the captain said, we heard it was like a concentration camp. And then we knew, okay, we had a friend, not a foe, because we were concerned, right?
Yeah.
And so he started asking questions, and we talked, and mainly the men talked to him, right? And so we finally went to sleep, tried to sleep. The men were going to, guard us, sit up and guard us all night. They gave us something to eat, something to drink. And I remember, I don't know what time it was, the wee hours of the morning, I heard these huge military helicopters flying overhead. And I thought, what's going on? We still didn't know what happened. We knew there was a shooting at Port Kaitumba. We knew nothing about what had happened in Jonestown. And so the captain came in that morning. I hear these huge military helicopters, right, flying over. And I'm thinking, where are they going? Right? Where are they going? Must be going to, Port Kaitum. And so when we got up that morning, the captain said, here's the report. 500 have run into the jungle and 500 are dead. And we just were, all of us, the Evans had, Sandra had her sister there, friends, my parent, my mother, my family, and the other two men. We all had people that we loved there. And so I just prayed. I knew, excuse me, somebody from my family ran into the jungle. I knew that somebody had to be one or two of those 500. And I prayed it was my brother, because my brother was so precious. I mean, my brother was such a sweet soul, such a sweet soul. He wanted to be a veterinarian, right? He wanted to be a veterinarian. And I thought, okay, Michelle, I mean, I want everybody to live, but my brother, that was my brother,
Yeah.
right? And so I figure anybody can make it, he can make it. And so we flew out that day on a Guyanese Air Force jet into Georgetown. And then we got there, they gathered us in the school. And it's white, so there's a few of us. It was quite a few, both, all of them, we were all there. And the woman sat there and had the nerve to say, no compassion, no empathy at all. It says, well, I'm for the US State Department. Basically, if you want to come home, you have to sign this document because we're going to charge you $1,100 for your plane ticket. You will not get a passport unless you pay this fee. And I looked, and I think I might even said something. It's like, are you kidding me? And then it's like, this is what Jim's talking about, how evil the United States is, right? You
Yeah.
got that other voice in your head, right? You got this other voice. And then it was so horrible. It was so horrible the way we were treated. And then we went to the hotel, and then, of course, the reporters were swarmed. But Jakari was so precious. He was so good. And I know it had to be the Valium calmed him down,
Yeah.
right? But even that night, he slept well. It's almost because that was one night. It wasn't chaos, right? It wasn't the mic with Jim on the microphone, waking the children up and having to grab them, run through the jungle, run through the path, to drop them behind a kitchen table that's turned over in the dirt in the middle
Yeah.
of the night. Because the babies were traumatized, and so he slept good that night. And he just, he clung on. And the next day, I don't think, I know I didn't believe anybody. I kid you not, it took me almost 20 years to really accept the fact that they were gone.
Wow.
It took me that long. It took me that long because I would always look at somebody, is that so and so? I mean, I thought I saw Joe. I would call a friend and say, did so and so die in Jonestown? Because I couldn't accept it. I could not accept the loss. All that time, I couldn't accept the loss.
Wow.
It was too many, And by the time we got to the hotel, of course, the reporters had swarmed us. And I remember making a call to my dad, and I saw Mike Prokes. And I asked Mike Prokes, why did you get my sister out? Because I think they might have had some kind of friendship growing, right?
Okay.
And he just looked at me with this, look on his face. And so the first person I called was my dad. And then my dad said, first thing he said was, how come you didn't get your brother out? And then I knew then I didn't have a father any longer.
Wow.
And this virus guilt kicked in.
Wow.
And so, the story is we all, all of us we had such bad athlete's feet, because we were wearing those boots and those socks and just the weather and, but we were well taken care of there. We were treated well. But still, I think we were just in shock. And I think there was a horribly rude, reporter that interviewed us. But it was hard. It was hard because we didn't know what the future looked like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Odell was there. He was just a wreck. Stanley was there, and we just we clung together in a way, right? And we had separate rooms that we would just kind of hang out together trying to get through it. Odell bought me and Jakari our outfits to come home with because we had nothing but the clothes on our back, so he had gotten money from an interview and he went shopping for us because we couldn't leave and made sure we had decent clothes to come back with, but it was hard. But we all gathered together um and tried to cope with as much as we could and still not believing that. I never saw, when I tell you, even after the suicide drills, I never thought ever that we would die by our own hands. I never saw it. I never saw it. And then I think I should have saw it, but I don't think I had to fake so much between getting on the learning crew, the letter they found that I wanted to leave, and I was under so much stress trying to pretend like I was happy. I think if I had thought there was a chance that could actually be a reality that we take our own lives, I wouldn't have mentally. I couldn't have dealt with it.
Hmm.
I'd have been in special care unit, shot up with drugs. There's no way I could have. There's no way I could have held on to that and act normally.
Yeah.
There's no way.
So the reports are coming in. You realize over 900 people are gone. You have that to deal with. Your mom is gone. Your sister's gone. Your brother's gone. You got nieces and nephews that are gone. And then on top of that, reports are coming in that your husband is one of the gunmen on the airstrip.
Mhm.
How do you deal with that?
That was hard. But I wasn't surprised in a sense, right? I mean, I'm looking at myself like, oh my God, I'm the widow of a murder assassin. My son is the son of an assassin who killed a U.S. congressman and several others, right? So how is that going to play out in our life? How is that going to play out? And I wasn't surprised. I had to say it, I wasn't surprised. Joe was changing and I could see it. And I thought at one point he was using drugs. I thought they must be something's going on because he was changing.
Mm.
I don't know if you read the book. Joe had a lot of good in him, like many people, but something was changing in Jonestown. And when they said, he was one of the assassins, I didn't doubt it because I knew if he found me, I would be dead.
Yeah.
I had no doubt about that. No
Yeah.
doubt. No doubt. What happened was his mother couldn't deal with it. When I talked to her, she says, "You said that Joe was an assassin and murdered people." I said, "Mama, that's what they're saying. That's what they're saying." So they had a hard time dealing with that. Very
Yeah.
difficult.
So Jack, you weren't actually in Jonestown. You were back in San Francisco when all of this happened.
Right. I was in San Francisco at the time. Yes. Uh-huh.
Were you at the Temple headquarters, or were you just in San Francisco?
Well, eventually, it was a night. It was a Saturday night where we do have church, right? But what had happened on that day with me is like, you know, with all these people gone, you know, in the church, you know what I'm saying? The temple meetings were just a shadow of what they were. You know what I'm saying? It was just like people were sitting far apart. There was maybe 100 people when there usually was at this time, maybe 800 people or so, but now it's only a few people. So what had happened is around 12 o'clock that day, I went to go pick up a girl that I was dating at that time, and we were going to go see this movie called Magic with Anthony Hopkins in it, right? And when I got out of there, uh, she went her way, I went my way. This is
Mhm.
November 18th, this 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, we don't know anything. So I went over to a friend's house, my friend Tyrone, who also was a member of the church and had family over there. And uh, it's a Saturday night service. We're thinking, okay, it's 2 o'clock. We might go down to the church to the meeting. That's how loose things were. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But the first thing I heard that there was, and to this day, every time I hear, this is a CBS special report, that little flash that they do before something goes down, I get really anxious, because apparently they broke into regular programming, so something's going on here, So they said there's been an incident in the Jonestown Agricultural Mission, at a outpost called Port Kaituma, where they said that there was a shooting. They're not saying anything about the congressman's dead. They did mention the congressman, but they say that Congressman Leo Ryan left here on the 15th, and uh, he's just now you know, getting there and everything like that. And they said, we knew that the congressman was going to be going down in Jonestown. Most of the people in San Francisco that paid attention knew that the congressman was going down to Jonestown. And when they said that incident happened, me and my friend looked at each other and we were like, an incident? And there was a shooting. Not thinking about Kool-Aid, not thinking about nobody killing themselves. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. So I promise you, every television station that we turned it to, it was on. Every radio station we turned it to, it was on. You couldn't get away from it. So they're hearing, da 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 this. There was a report. Now they're saying, this is like 30 minutes later, they're saying that the congressman was shot and we don't know what's going on down there right now, but we're waiting on reports, da 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 da. Lo and behold, as time went on, more and more of the story got out, and it was just shocking. Me and my friend went down to the temple because we figured we could get more information. And we went down to the temple, and I never forget, we went to the balcony of the temple, and there was only a few people there, and they got the meeting started, and I could look down on the balcony in a bird's eye view at the people that were in the auditorium area. And that's the first time I could actually see a physical rumor because people were in little groups and they were like, telling this story, you know what I'm saying? They're like, no, no, no. And so I'm like, wow, okay, what's going on? So I never forget that Archie Imes, the associate pastor at that time, basically said, you know, we don't know what's going on down there. We've heard what you heard, da da da. All our communications, is been disconnected. We're not able to contact Georgetown or Jonestown. So we suggest that you guys, go back, home and find out what's going on yourselves. It was the shortest meeting I've ever been in people's Temple, in and out. And it was kind of chilling to know that there was a message sent to San Francisco for the people. Later on, in hindsight, it was chilling to know that there was a message that those people in People's Temple in San Francisco were to follow suit by killing themselves. You know what I'm saying? Just like the message got down to Georgetown with Sharon and her children. Those people were supposed to do it. That was supposed to spread. They were supposed to do that too. But luckily, that didn't happen in San Francisco. By that time, we were gone. And so the story just kept ratcheting it up. 400 people, died, 500 people, 700 people. And it was a wild time in my 17-year-old, well, 18-year-old life.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, just your life, everybody that you've known, the typical, church bus, they went on it, in another in another story said there's a church bus that in another church that turned over and God forbid 15 people got killed. Okay. There's no way you can equate that to People's Temple because chances are that was probably a very good church and those folks had loving relationships with each other and probably knew them, but not like People's Temple. People's Temple, you were always in close proximity, you know, and they were like more than sister and brother. It's like it was on another level.
Yeah.
So then you hear about not only this person you grew up with, that person you grew up and whatnot, and this and that, but yeah, it was. I don't know how I I I started to say got over it. It's always there,
Sure.
you know, all the time. You know what I'm saying? But
All the
you have
time.
your where moments, it ebbs and flows through, throughout time and stuff like that. But it's just is just something to deal with. You know, I'm always reminded, you know, God doesn't give you anything more than you can bear.
Hmm.
But I really have had to question that. You know, you're like, wait a minute,
For
but
sure.
God, you don't understand. You know, this is,
Mhm.
you know, I don't, people don't come back
You
from
can't.
this. You know, so
Mhm.
yeah.
And you don't come back from because even it's 47 years, and there's not
Mhm.
a, I kid you not, I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't think about it.
I'm sure. I'm
Yeah.
sure.
I don't think there's a
Mhm.
day that goes by that, the holidays, missing my mom and, and just like Jackie said, the friends and the memories and all that's gone. And people can't comprehend, the loss was everywhere. The loss was in California. The loss was in Los Angeles. Across the country. The loss is generational.
Yeah.
It's a generational loss, and there is a generational suffering that people don't understand. But you can't comprehend. 20 years, I believe, I could not even think about them being gone. I changed my name. I never spoke about it. People
Mm.
would be at the conference room in a meeting, a lunch, a birthday party. They said, "What about those people in Jonestown? They killed themselves." I'm like, "They were so and so," and I would say, "Why do you think that?" I wouldn't say, "Hey, I was
Yeah.
there." I would say,
Sure.
"Why do you think that?" And so all those years, because I'm waiting, and finally, I had to come to terms that they're not coming. They're not coming home here. I'm not going to see them here.
Yeah.
You know, Although they're never forgotten about. You know, and I think that's why I think the ancestors are going to be pleased by what we're doing, because we are representing them,
That's it right there.
because they never
That's
died
why
knowing
I'm
that they
here.
were part of.
That's why I'm
Yeah,
here.
they never. Right. They never thought. They never died. They
Mm.
didn't. They died. No, not. No, they died not knowing they were part of a con. They
Yeah.
didn't mean anything but a dollar.
Yeah.
That's all they meant to him. That's all they meant to them. That's all they meant to them. And so we had to honor them in this way.
Yeah.
Because who else is going to do it? Who else
Nobody's
is going
doing
to
it.
do it?
They don't
Nobody has
even
done it.
they don't even
Nobody has
mention it.
done
You know, this,
it.
yeah, this was
Didn't,
black. Even, I don't mean to cut you off, Leslie,
no, go
but
ahead.
it was black. You know, even the white people, you're a nigger too. You know, it's this was black. You know what I'm saying? And people, it's hard. Some people don't even know that black people died in Jonestown.
We just hundred, excuse me,
It's
hundreds and
crazy.
hundreds. We saw the comment. You saw
Yeah,
the comment. They didn't
because
even
of
know
this
there was
narrative,
that
you
the
know what I'm
narrative.
saying? Yeah, yeah, Jonestown, take any photo of a group of people in Jonestown and tell me what you see.
Absolutely.
There's two
Hmm.
white people there
Absolutely.
amongst 80 black
Right,
people. You know what I'm saying? Or maybe 15
hmm,
white people against 80 black people.
because we were the
Take the same
majority.
shot. Look at the aerial shots of what
Exactly.
happened over there. You know what I'm saying? And I've said this before, and I keep saying it, that all he did was study Hitler. That was his
Hmm.
thing. He
Hmm.
idolized Hitler. That's all he talked about. And people say, yeah, but in the sense that he didn't want the country to go into a fascist state like Hitler. No, you know, this was he loved the control of Hitler had.
That's right.
So
That's right.
again, and I'll keep saying this: when you look at the bulldozers in Auschwitz that were putting those bodies of those Jews
Hmm.
inside ditches,
Hmm.
and how they were turning their skin into lampshades, and all the shoes that came from those Jews, and taking them to gas chambers, and taking their gold and their out of their mouths and everything like that. Okay, you see those pictures of all those dead. It's a terrible sight. And then you look at the pictures in Jonestown and you put them side by side,
Eerily similar.
Hmm. That's right. Eerily
even
similar.
down to his Eva Braun drinking poison. Okay, you
Tell it,
got
Jackie. That's right. That's right. That's
that
right.
it to
And the
me
gun
it's
and the
too much. Yeah, it's too much to either consciously or unconsciously he did that
Mhm,
because of what was in his mind already, the control. But yeah,
mhm.
just yeah, the whole thing is too similar for me. You know what I'm saying? He grew up in Indiana. Yeah, he supposedly, one day, some child was in, couldn't get a haircut inside this place. These things. He did a lot of good. The church did a lot of good, but the hard part, Jocelyn, is getting this idea across. All this good and fun and everything like this, and all this dirt. You People want you to conceptualize that, and you can't.
You can't.
You know. And the way it ended is the worst, one of the worst things that ever happened in history. People still don't know about it. This
Right.
generation coming up. It's some people is really vague. Oh yeah, yeah, big Kool-Aid, Flavor Aid, like that's an argument which one it was. you know,
Does it
that's
matter?
as far as their understanding goes. Well,
Hmm.
Flavor Aid yeah, but it's a knockoff. Oh yeah, and they sued Kool-Aid for that. What are you talking about? You know what I'm saying? Is this the idea of what happened over there is just evil, you
Yeah.
know. So
It
yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. Absolutely evil.
So,
Absolutely.
Leslie, as we bring this first episode to a close, the anniversary is in a couple of days.
It is.
And this episode will go live on the anniversary. What do you expect to accomplish with launching this Black Jonestown podcast? And what do you want people to take from it? And what can people expect in the coming weeks from the episodes that are coming?
Well, it is going to launch on the memorial of Jonestown, the massacre, suicide. Our ancestors are going to be remembered. They're going to be remembered. And this episode, with us having this conversation, the first episode of Black Jonestown, who represents the souls that cannot speak anymore, to the abuse, the grift. This is their gift. This is a gift to them.
Yes.
It's a
Mm,
gift to our ancestors. Like, we have not forgotten. It took 47 years, but this team right here, it's all in divine order. And this launch is all in divine order. And I'm proud to be a part of it. And what I expect
I
is,
am too.
I'm so proud to be a part of it. Um, and what I expect is the unexpected, whatever that may be, whatever that may be. Either it'll be received or it won't, but it doesn't matter because we're paying homage to our ancestors, those 305 children that died with no voice, who were murdered, who didn't have a chance to grow up, didn't have a chance to grow up. We're paying homage to them. We are paying, this is for them. And so the upcoming episodes we have worked diligently on, and I think people they're going to learn information they never had. They're going to learn from this, and there will be a different, entirely different narrative, an entirely different narrative, and we'll be there for questions. We'll be there for comments. But I'm proud of what we're doing, and I thank you all as a team because I could. This
Yeah.
is a we could not have done it without each other. And
Absolutely.
I'm excited. I'm excited for November 18th because it's changing. It's not gonna be a normal, for some people it'll be a normal memorial, and I want them to have that memorial. I want them to give honor to those that passed. We're in a whole different ball game right now. Whole different ball
Absolutely.
game.
It's just when I think about it, Jocelyn, it's just like I have the opportunity with two black women here 50 years later to represent in this forum, what happened basically when I think about Jonestown, black women,
That's right.
they were taking care of their children were the man and left.
Hmm.
You had a grandmother with three foster children, and then
Hmm.
they come to this, they just want a better life. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
That's all.
The-
That's
you
all.
know, and like I was talking about the history, you know what I'm saying? Okay, Black Wall Street, the story got a real big boost about 5 years ago. Look how long ago that was, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And this thing with Jonestown now is Leslie and I and a few others that are our age or a little bit younger are the last generation. So it's important for this to go forward in perpetuity for some
Yeah.
child 25 years from now or 5 years from now or whatever to hear this, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Because it's going to have pushback because if you ever notice this part comes up about the fakery, but it keeps going. You have to stop there.
Mhm.
I'm just at a loss. This is the engine. This is the engine. The core
That's
of
right.
People's Temple was
That's right.
black.
Mhm.
There's no getting around it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I've read some of the comments on the different
Mhm.
platforms that you posted
Mhm.
the trailer on, and a lot of people think it's a race. It's a race thing. It's racist.
Right. Of course they do.
Of course,
Yeah.
the moment we start speaking out, it's always a problem. We're race baiting, but
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
just believe that it's time to just take the covers off. There's
That's
always
right.
been one narrative. Every time
That's
you see
right.
a documentary, it's one narrative. There's
That's
another
right.
voice that's never been heard. So
That's right.
I appreciate you letting me be a part of the team, and I'm going to do all I can to continue to bring your both of your vision to fruition. And I pray God.
Well,
Go ahead.
it's our vision because you wouldn't be here if you didn't see the same vision. You wouldn't be here.
Absolutely,
You wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be a part of this.
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
it's Black Jonestown.
It's Black Jonestown.
It's Black Jonestown.
It
What a
is.
what a wonderful way
Black
to end. It's
Jonestown.
Black Jonestown.
Thank you for listening. Stay with us as we continue uncovering the stories behind Black Jonestown. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.
They say that